Hi there, Mark here again, and welcome to part 1 of my build guide for the re-release version of the iconic Tamiya Hotshot. Now, although it's the re-release version, it does go together obviously very similar to the original 1985 version, and as such it is a very different design and doesn't really follow the way that most of the modern Tamiya kits go together. So what I recommend before we start is have a good read through the manual and have a look at what's going to be coming up. Now, one of the main things to note is it doesn't go through opening just one parts bag and then using all those parts and then onto the next like in the modern builds. Although we do have parts bags A, B, C and D, they're just used randomly throughout the build, and also there are a lot more bags that haven't got any names just to make it more complicated. But parts bags A, B, C and D are referred to in the parts list as parts BA, BB, BC and BD, and I have gone through and worked out what the other parts bags names are. So this one is MD, as you can see. This one with the ball joints in is MB. This one with the metal plates in here is MP. The one with the bushings in is MS. You've got your box spanner and your wrench in MT, and these bags are all parts MR. So you've got that one with the gears in. We've got the bearings and bushings, and the drive cups and pinions, all bags MR. And one other important thing to note is you get 2 tubes of grease. You've got the ceramic grease and you've got the moly grease. So where it shows the grey shaded tube, that's where you use the ceramic grease. But you will notice in some parts of the build you'll see this white tube icon, and that refers to the moly grease. So with all that out of the way, as important as it is, we'll get the parts ready here and get on with step 1. And on this build I'm going to be replacing all the plastic bushings and the brass bushings with metal bearings, so I suggest you do the same if you can. And step 1 is simply placing those bushes or bearings into the drive gear, like so. And as it shows here, just dropping those 3 metal bevel gears, the small bevels, into the spur differential gear. Okay, straight on to step 2, which is a lot more complicated than step 1. First off, we've got to get your prop joint, and we've got to get a bearing and a gear and another bearing. So let's get on with that. So onto your prop joint, get an 1150 bearing, pop that on, get plastic part G4, and then you've got this thrust bearing. So it's got flat sides and the bearings are in the middle, as you can see. And this is H1, the bevel gear, and that caged ball bearing goes in there like so. Get your prop joint and it goes in that hole, and we've got to get somehow that prop through the ball bearing and the gear, and then drop in your 850 bearing or bushing right in the end, and that holds the end of the prop. It's a bit tricky, but it does go in the end. It should look like that. I'm going to get some grease on that bevel eventually, don't worry about that. As you can see here, you've got to cut MD2 in half, which is your urethane kind of spacer, or bushing as it calls it. I cut through mine with a knife, as you can see, and that has to pop in the end of MR15, which is your gearbox joint, and that just cushions the end of the dog bone, I think. Then get your 1150 bearing, these are provided in the kit for this part, into that hole. Nice tight fit. Your gearbox joint, push it through, and then we're going to secure that with the BD4, which is the large E-clip. Okay, that's a nice trick, because that'll stop your joint from falling out if you lose a dog bone. So yeah, I like that. Then you get plastic part B7, and that pops in that hole there, like so. There's a 5x25 tube. Make sure you measure this up on the diagram, because there are others of a similar length but not quite the same length, and that goes over that part we just put in. Just going to lube up the bevel on the drive gear, and then that goes over that shaft. And as you can see, that meshes up with the gear on the prop. and a 2x28 shaft goes into the output cup. And just be careful because it does go right the way through if you don't hold it in there with that bushing. And then it's the MR11 metal bevel, which is the left hand side, and the L is stamped on it if you look in those little holes in the back. And just pop that on like so. Now you need the other half of the case, which is a G3. The gearbox joint again, put your urethane bushing in. Your metal bearing again, same as the other side. Pop that through and secure with a circlip or E-clip. And then MR10, which is the right side bevel gear. And as you can see, it's same putting moly grease onto these metal parts. Just dab a bit on around the gear. It will get transferred into all of the grooves as it runs later on. And then the differential spur that you made up earlier just pops over the top of that, like so. I'll just get a bit more of the grease onto these little bevel gears. So with that done, I think the next step we're going to be putting the two off together. So I'm just going to seal around the mating surfaces with a bit of AW grease just to seal out the dust and the dirt. Yep, so step 3 is joining those two halves together. I just need these two plastic parts, red parts. You got E9 and E10. Got my parts ready lined up here. And this looks like it might be rather tricky, so let's hope that everything doesn't just fall out. It looks like E9 just goes in there like so, just a little tab clips in. And then E10 goes into that hole at the bottom, I think. It's very tricky to see on the manual. And we're going to try and wrestle this thing together. Well, I failed that way, so I'll try doing it from the other side. Let's try again. I think that's it. Kind of got to get those bearings, the bevel gears into position, I think. Bit of a gap at the minute, but I think that should close up. Make sure these tabs are in place. Yeah, I think it's a 12mm self-tapper into this hole here. At least that's holding it all together for now. It looks like a 3x20 machine screw goes in that hole there. And then it looks like this metal part, MS7, if you can see. It says it's a gearbox guard, and I think it's going to go over the end of that machine screw. And then just a flange nut on the end. Yeah, it was a bit tricky, but I'd say that's job done. Step 4 is attaching the pinion gear to the motor, and you also need to put that motor plate on. As you can see, I've put on there. I've already fitted the pinion. I've used the 15. It does also come with a 13. And just make sure that the end of the pinion is 17mm away from the motor plate. In step 5, we're going to fit the motor. And as you can see, for the different pins, you can go for the 13, 15, and also a 16 and a 17. And the way that you adjust the position of the motor and set the mesh with the pinion and the spur is to use these 4 plates in different positions. Now I'm using 15. So as you might be able to see here, I need to put 2 plates either side of the mounting screw BA5, which is 27mm long. So let's just try and get this into place. Get a 27mm screw and then put on part B6, plastic part B6, like so. And then somehow, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, I'm going to put the 4 plates in. So there's 2, then the other 2. I'll just zoom in. And get that screw and fit it between the 4 plates, like so. Then you want this 22mm hollow tube, and that's got to go in the other mounting hole there. Push through the 27mm screw into that tube and we'll get the motor in. So you can see the 2 screws there poking through. Get those lined up with the holes in the motor. and we'll tighten up the screws. Now it does show in the instructions to take out the prop joint. I don't know why I didn't do that, but it's still in place, and I can feel it turning the motor around now. In fact, you can probably see the motor turning around, but I can actually pull that back out and push it back in again. So I think no harm done there. Anyway, so that's the end of step 5. Step 6 is the front gear assembly, and again it's very simply, you get these parts H2 and H3 and just insert your bearings or your bushings, one in each end, and then fit in the 3 tiny bevel gears into your spur gear. In step 7 we're going to make up the gearbox itself. This time it doesn't mention anything about those neoprene bushings that go in the gearbox joints. I will fit this first this time because it's get it out of the way. 1150 bushing or bearing in that hole. Pop the joint through, and again secure that with a circlip like so. Then an 1150 bearing or bushing in there, and again same as the rear gearbox, we've got that thrust bearing goes into that part of this bevel gear. Pop that into the case, a little 850 bushing or bearing in the end like so. Then we've got to get the prop joint to hold it all together. It's a bit tricky, you've got to turn this till it's in the right position, but when it is, it will push all the way through straight into that 850 bearing at the end. Then you've got your MR11 bevel, which is the left side, and that just goes over the output of the gearbox joint there. Again, get some moly grease on that. Ceramic grease on this bevel joint. When you've done that, you want the other side, which is G1, the other half of the case. Then exactly the same procedure with the bearing and the gearbox joint and the circlip. Like that, and just a note, I really did have to force that bearing in. I had to get a screwdriver and force it in because it wasn't seating properly and I couldn't get the circlip on, but it's in place now. Yeah, you might need a good push to get that bearing in. Get the H2 gear and the longer of the 2 hollow tubes, a 30mm tube, goes in that hole, and then the gear goes on this way around with the flat at the end there. Then get your H3 gear and the shorter of the 2 tubes, which is 25mm, that goes in that hole at the back, and then the gear over that shaft. And obviously get some ceramic grease on all these gears. Not forgetting to put plastic part B7 into the end of that hollow shaft like that. Now we need MR10, which is the right side bevel gear. It goes over that output joint. Get some moly grease onto that gear, and the little 28mm shaft goes in the hole in the middle, and the differential spur goes over like so. So we should be ready for step 8 now, where we put the 2 halves together. You now need plastic part E1. Again, and that goes into the slot here. And we also need what's called the bumper stay, which is MR9. That's got to go down here, I think like that. And we'll try and tease these 2 halves together now. That was a bit easier than the rear gearbox, and this part's just fell out. It does show you there in the diagram the angle for the screw hole to be, so I think it should be in that position. So to stop that falling out, we'll just get a 3x27, we'll get that in there, and that'll hold it into place, secured with a flange nut. Another 3x27 goes in this hole here, and that screws into the plastic, I believe. And there's just 4 12mm self tappers into the 4 holes that are left, so that's one there, one at the top, one here at the back, and that hole there at the bottom. So just do those up, and that is step 8 finished. So there we go, it's the front and rear gearbox is finished, we got the motor on, and that was quite a little bit different. I did enjoy doing that, but I think I need a bit of a rest now. So on that note, I'll call the end of part 1 to a halt. Hope you found that enjoyable. Hope maybe you found something useful in there too, and I hope to see you on part 2. Thanks for watching. Bye.